election the Motor City has seen in a decade.
Imagine a city where government and business and labor, residents and developers, neighborhoods and faith-based groups, and the philanthropic sit at the table working together. I will convene that table.
We need leadership that is ready, that is equipped, and prepared with a clear plan to continue the progress that we've made.
One of these two candidates will be Detroit's next mayor, the first new mayor in 12 years, replacing a leader widely credited for Detroit's comeback. A high-profile pastor with a grassroots campaign, squaring off against a city council president who's looking to take the next step. And tonight, they're taking your questions in our forum. Neighborhood improvement, schools, jobs, and fighting crime. All the issues that'll make or break your vote. The candidates are ready. The conversation starts now. Welcome to the World Series of Detroit Politics here on this special edition of the Pulse. We're glad to have you with us. I'm Roop Raj. Your questions for Council President Mary Sheffield and Triumph Church Senior Pastor Solomon Kinloch came in fast and furious, and we're grateful to hear from you because you are helping drive this conversation that you'll see tonight. So many of you have asked about the same topics, and just know that if you don't see your specific question on the screen, that doesn't mean we didn't listen to you and hear you. We have a lot to get through and no time to waste. The candidates will get equal time, and the format, well, it's free-flowing, a conversation just like you'd expect here on The Pulse, Detroit's only nightly political talk show. Ladies first, we start with City Council President Mary Sheffield in the hot seat, and we thank you, Councilwoman, for joining us here on The Pulse tonight. It's always good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
So here we go on a very important conversation, and one that the viewers have been so intimately involved with here on The Pulse. We have so many questions that came in from Detroiters who are big Fox 2 viewers, and we thank you for your questions. I'm just going to begin with one of the questions about blight.
Yes.
Specifically, this woman asked a question. I have a question specifically for Mary Sheffield. What are your plans to rebuild the areas in which Duggan took the initiative to rid blight, leaving streets with minimal houses? That was a big plan.
Yes.
How do you plan on continuing
And this is a great point because we talk about the foundation that has been laid. 47,000 vacant structures have been demolished under this administration, and now we have to rebuild our neighborhoods. And so my plan is to utilize the vacant land to build more affordable housing, pass to home ownership, particularly focusing in on single-family homes in Detroit. But more importantly, we also want to engage each district and figure out what is the best use of that land by engaging with each of the residents in our neighborhoods and our block clubs to figure out what is the best use. Is it housing? Is it going to be grocery stores or child care centers or restaurants? We want to go throughout a citywide engagement process and hear the needs of our community, and then incentivize and actively and aggressively seek development in those particular areas.
Now, you're a city council president already, so you understand how things work, and so you have an institutional knowledge of that.
Yeah.
How hard is it to decide to do something new like that and pull the trigger and do it?
You know, it's really about having the will, being very intentional, and really focusing your effort that this is what we as a city want to prioritize. I believe that we have a lot of willing developers who are interested in developing housing in our city, but we have to make sure that we're gearing that housing towards our neighborhoods and that we're providing the programs and incentives that would allow for it to be financially feasible. We know that property taxes is one of the #1 issues that is a barrier to both residents and businesses and housing as well. And so the more that we can address structural property tax reform in our city, I think it's also more feasible that we see more neighborhood development as well.
Mayor Mike Duggan took a lot of pride in bringing the population of Detroit up for the first time in many years. Do you fear that the challenges that you have in front of you, that you'll see that stagnate or fall?
No, I don't. We have 6,000 pending applications for new housing that is underway right now through a pilot program that me and my colleague Durhaw sponsored, which indicates that more units are coming online. We have people who are interested in looking for housing in Detroit. So no, I think that it will continue to increase, but I do believe that the foundational things, whether it's education, our neighborhoods, schools, making sure that we continue to reduce public safety, these fundamental and foundational issues we have to continue to prioritize and invest in so that people can feel comfortable raising their families in Detroit.
You and I have talked about this quite a bit, that American Rescue Fund money that came from the Biden administration. It helped puff up up the budget quite a bit and allow for programs to continue and grow. Now with that money drying up, $800+ million, how do you still give pay raises to your police officers, your firefighters, keep the city services running, keep crime down, yet not have those funds available?
So I think it's important to mention that we used our ARPA funding as a one-time allocation. It wasn't used to fill any holes or any deficits. We knew that it was one-time funding, and so we already prepared ourselves to know that that money will be ending in 2026. But what I do know is we also have tons of private entities, corporate, our philanthropic sector, who are willing to step up and figure out what have been the most impactful programs in Detroit and how can we sustain those. We're also looking at ways that we can diversify our revenues, looking at innovative ways to bring revenue into Detroit and continue our partnerships with the state and federal government. So we are going to look at all different ways and make sure that we have a chief growth officer in our office whose #1 job is to look at how we diversify our revenues and grow our population.
And it's going to take a team, it's going to take a village, but Councilwoman, you know, with all of these foundations you're talking about, depending on Kresge and others, they're under threat right now by the federal government having their funds stripped. How do you depend on an institution that may not have the money themselves?
Yeah, so never say depend. They can help supplement, right? We're not going to depend on anyone. We're going to continue to grow our population, get people in good paying jobs, because ultimately we want to increase our tax base, which will grow and bring revenue to Detroit. But we do have numerous foundations that have already stepped up and said we want to help our next mayor, and we will be very intentional about being strategic on how we can use those funds to supplement the amazing programs and the myriad of priorities that we have in Detroit.
We have a lot of people asking about crime. In fact, so many of you have asked questions about that. That was probably the second most asked about topic with the hundreds of emails that we got. This one comes from Terrence. And Terrence, and by the way, every single one of you, thank you for your emails. So many of them coming in. This one coming in from Terrence, whose question you see that says West Detroit. Lifelong Detroiters, 60 years. We need safety. We need to be able to send our kids to the store, to the parks, go play outside. He says we can't. We need the National Guard. And please do not mention community groups because they do not work and everyone knows it. This is salt of the earth person who lives in the city who knows well. Terrence, what do you tell Terrence, Councilwoman, about
Well, I will say
concerns?
that community groups do work, and the numbers show it. Every area and zip code that our community violence intervention groups are in, crime has went down by over 40% in those zip codes.
But still the crime is a problem,
Still
yes?
the crime, I'm not denying that. One life lost is still far too many. But the reality is that this year compared to last year, we've seen a reduction in every category of violent crime. What we have to do is continue our partnerships with law enforcement and with our community partners. And it has to be a holistic approach. We cannot police our way out of public safety. And so I believe in ensuring that we are properly investing in prevention, launching the city's first ever Office of Gun Violence Prevention that provides a more holistic approach and provides more access to youth programming and youth prevention services as well, but also ensuring that DPD has the resources that they need, whether it's technology or better pay, so that they are better deployed throughout our neighborhood, so that there's more of a presence in our communities that's not over-policing, but that's building trust with community.
So many people point to VP Harris's campaign and say that there seemed to be in some ways a denial of the problems that people were feeling. People said things like, you know, Ms. Harris came out and VP Harris said, you know, the economy's fine, the crime's not a problem, the border's not an issue necessarily. Do you think that local politicians have a responsibility to say, look, I get that the numbers say one thing, but you're feeling something else?
Oh, most definitely. I've never denied that. In fact, every time crime comes up, I always say one life loss is too many, and the perception of crime is what we must work on in this city. I do think, though, that you can acknowledge that, yes, some of our efforts are working while also acknowledging that there's more work to do. And I believe that Detroit can be a place, the safest, biggest city in America, and that is my goal. And we want people to feel safe to walk to school, to be in their communities, because that is what the foundation of a thriving community is.
What about Terrence's point about the National Guard? This is a person who lives in the city of Detroit. These are not all Trumpers who are saying bring in the National Guard. Some people in Chicago that I've talked to say, who live in the city, say, bring in the National Guard, we need help. Is there ever a situation in which you believe the National Guard should be a part of helping police the city?
You know, I have been very firm in my approach that I do not believe we need to militarize our neighborhoods to address public safety. I welcome federal resources, whether it's funding for housing, funding for mental health, funding for our community violence intervention work, but I believe that it is going to take strong partnerships rooted in our support with the federal government and law enforcement and community. And so so that will be my approach. And as mayor, my goal is to always make sure that we are proactive in preventing the National Guard from coming to Detroit.
But kind of like the nonprofit world, you said we're not going to depend on for funding some of these nonprofits, but you're going to use the help. Is there ever a situation where the National Guard would be needed? Would there be a time that you would call the governor, call the president and say, hey, I need help?
I'm not sure. It would have to be something that is the will of the elected officials here in Detroit in the state of Michigan, but not something that is done, overstepping the will of the government here in the city of Detroit. And again, we are going to do all that we can to invest in our police department, the men and women on the ground here doing the work to ensure that they fully are staffed and resourced to eliminate and reduce gun violence in Detroit.
What's something that Mayor Duggan did that you plan to expressly follow? And perhaps there's more than one thing. And what's one thing that you would do differently than Mayor Mike Duggan?
Well, I think he did a great job of driving economic growth in Detroit, really partnering with the private sector to feel confident in investing in our city. We have had tons of manufacturing industries come to Detroit, creating thousands of jobs for Detroiters, so we want to keep that going. I also think that he did a great job working with the council, because we supported this work in ensuring that basic city services were functioning, whether we're talking about our garbage being picked up or grass being cut or snow being removed. These are basic city services that every resident deserves, and we want to keep that going. But without a doubt, my focus that would not necessarily differ, but we will build upon, is neighborhoods. There's no doubt that we have to ensure that every single neighborhood has opportunity and is feeling the growth of our city.
You feel like they've been neglected?
I feel that we have more work to do. Detroit is a big city. There has been some investments in some areas of Detroit, but more needs to fill it. And that is my goal, is to build up our communities in our neighborhood so that every neighborhood feels the opportunity, that we're building more housing, more paths to home ownership, and that we're raising the incomes of the residents that live here. We still have an extremely high poverty rate in Detroit, and I have always been on the front lines with our men and women in labor, ensuring that we're pushing for good livable wage jobs in Detroit, but we want to ensure that we are pushing for increased upward mobility for the residents that live here in Detroit as well.
Does it worry you at all that the education system in our state is now ranked lower than it has in many, many years? Detroit still suffers from this institutional issue of bad education. Is that an issue for you?
Oh, most definitely. It is definitely a concern, and I can tell you that I will be a mayor who champions education at every level and at every opportunity.
How do you do that when you first get in?
So you do it, number one, by making sure that we're communicating with the superintendent. We are going to ensure that we are implementing what he has already stated is that is needed. Number one, after school programming. We have to ensure that within a 2-mile radius of every school, our young people have access to after school programming that can focus on literacy, which we know is the number one issue here in Detroit. It
costs money though, right?
It does. And then also we are going to focus on safe routes to schools and coordinated transportation to ensure that we're reducing absenteeism within our school district. But overall, we are going to ensure that we have a liaison working from our office to the school system and our charter schools as well, to ensure that we're building collaboration and communication to help be an asset to our schools.
Council President, we thank you so much for your time here on The Pulse. Thanks for taking the time and answering our viewers' questions as well here on the program. The conversation about Detroit's future does continue after the break. Triumph Church Senior Pastor Solomon Kinloch Jr. in the hot seat. You're watching a special edition of The Pulse on Fox 2.
This
a special edition of this program, diving into the future of Detroit. Our mayoral forum continues with Triumph Church Senior Pastor Solomon Kinloch Jr. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us here tonight.
I'm excited to be here tonight.
Well, we're excited to have you, and we have a lot of people on the other side of that camera who are excited to give us questions. And when we say we were flooded with your questions, we had a barrage of questions each and every day, every time we asked. And so many people were asking the question. And I'm going to begin with a question that we asked Councilwoman as well.
Yes.
And it's about crime, but specifically Terrence asked this question, saying, hey, I'm a lifelong Detroiter. He's lived there for 60 years. And Terrence goes on to say, we need the National Guard, and please do not mention community groups because they do not work and everyone knows it. That's the question on the right where it says West Detroit. I find this to be an interesting sentiment because I've heard this time and time again.
Yes.
What do you say to someone like Terrence, who's, by the way, watching tonight?
We're never in favor of National Guard or armed forces paroling and policing the streets of Detroit. Policing and patrolling is a local responsibility, and we have great men and women in the city of Detroit who carry out that responsibility with dignity, integrity, and respect. So we want to continue to do that. But we also have partnerships like the One Detroit Initiative, where you partner with the Wayne County Prosecutor, you partner with the FBI and other local and state and federal law enforcement agencies in order to continue to come up with a strategy to bring crime down. Because crime don't just affect Detroit, it affects us all.
But is there ever a time where, I understand what you're saying, National Guard is not supposed to take the place of Detroit police, but is there ever a time that they come in order to quell things down? Do you see that ever as an option?
Roop, you got to remember when you look back over the history in our community, that's a traumatic experience. Many people that come from even my own community and multiple communities know the trauma of what devastation that has brought and the residuals of that devastation that we continue to live with. Just the thought of it alone traumatizes an entire community of people. And so we're never in favor of having to have federal enforcement come in and police our streets.
Reverend, I got to ask you a question. When you look at the numbers of polling, oftentimes you see, your opponent is polling upwards of 50%, and you're rolling right around the 20% mark at some of the best polls. Does that concern you at all? And why decide that this was an important run that you continue to do with the vigor that you're doing right now?
Well, when you think of the fact that there are 518,000 voters, registered voters in the city of Detroit, and you only poll 500, that 500, most of the time when polls are done, are polled on and from the most likely voters. Well, the less propensity voters are never even asked, never even questioned. And when they are, many times they don't feel like government is taking them into consideration. I got into this race because that 80% of the population, no one's talking to, no one's reaching out to. They have issues that we ought to be concerned about and we ought to prioritize, like affordable housing, crime that you just mentioned, education, transportation, access to mental health professionals. And those are the things that they want to talk about, the infrastructure and the flooding that's continuously taking place in this community.
I want to take some more questions from our viewers. This one is about the neighborhood specifically. Carl is asking a question. Hey, what will you do as mayor of Detroit to assist the 48217 zone of Detroit to generate revenue and resources for the bare minimum, like grocery stores, pharmacies, retail shops, seeing as this corridor of Detroit is the first visual of the city coming from the south? Carla says God is first. She's hoping for good things for the city of Detroit. What do you tell Carla? What do you do to bring in that kind of movement?
Well, that's why I got into the race, because our economy has to be more inclusive. We have done some good things in the city of Detroit, but it hasn't gone far enough. We have to remind ourselves that we living in a city. This is why I got in this race. We're living in a city where the majority of our children are in poverty. We're living in a city where the poverty rate continues to climb and exasperate to the point where it's the highest it has been since 2017, where crime, violent crime, is the second highest in Detroit compared to the nation, and 3 out of 4 of our citizens are struggling with finding affordable housing. We have a constituency, 40% of the residents in this city use 50% of their income to keep roof over their head. What I would say to Carla and all the residents of the city of Detroit is that we have got to make this more inclusive. How do we do that? We have 38,000 small businesses in the city of Detroit. We will launch launch of the local hiring initiatives. Just imagine if those 38,000 businesses hire one Detroiter. That's an increase in income revenue. That's an increase in population. That's one of the greatest job growths that we would have seen in recent times.
That takes care of those who are willing to work and able to work and going to work. What about the children? You talked about poverty amongst young people. How do you take an institutional problem like that and try to fix it? Many people would argue without government experience.
Well, we got to stop kicking the can down the road. I've been pastoring the church for 27 years without government experience, and for 27 years I've taken direct action. We need not just institutional politicians and institutional practices because they have failed us. We need a fresh approach. Sometimes people are too close to the forest, they can't see the trees. Despite everything that they've done, you're saying what the people in the community are saying. It has not gone far enough. We got to start making sure that we're reaching our children at an early age. That's why the Kinlock Promise introduces the Children Trust Fund, that every baby born in the city of Detroit will receive a seed investment, and that seed investment will continue to climb each year until they get to the age of 18.
Good idea, sir, but where do you get the money to start a program like that?
We already got the money. The problem is that people are not being prioritized in the budget. We can do more if we prioritize the people. We can be fiscal and fair. We just got to make sure that we reallocate the resources where it's really making a difference in the lives of our citizens.
Where is the money going now that you would say, let's get that away from that project and head towards the people?
Well, it's about prioritization. Just think about the over $60 million in lawsuit settlements that was allocated in the police department. The first place you can find it is in the areas of waste, and those are areas that we will look in order to make sure that we have the appropriate funding, and we will do public and private partnerships. The Kinlock plan will have the Office of Philanthropy, which we will work with the foundations in the city who are already doing good work, but I believe that they will have a great appetite in order to coalesce and come together in order to do something that moves the needle much farther.
One thing that's moved the needle for this administration that's currently in office is working with the Trump administration. You've seen that at the state level. You've seen that with the mayoral level here. Duggan and Whitmer have worked with Trump in some capacity in order for him to then help the state of Michigan, help Detroit. How do you plan on continuing that when you don't necessarily see eye to eye with someone who's politically diametrically opposed from you?
Well, that's where leadership ability comes in, and that's where my own Christian conditioning comes to the forefront.
You've been able to do that already?
I've been able to do that already. We have a church that has spread it out to the regional area, and so we understand that you find compromise and cooperation where you can, but whenever people's rights and due processes are infringed upon, that's when the other part of leadership kick in. You're not just a builder, you also got to become a fighter.
But that becomes difficult because on one end you're talking about perhaps pushing back against some of the Trump administration and the policies, but at the same time wanting help from them. How do you manage that political dance?
Well, that's the great part of democracy, of being an American, that we can learn how to agree without being verbally and violently disagreeable. And that's what people in society want. They want some civility to come back into the conversation, and we haven't had that in a long time.
Let me ask you about transportation. We have a couple questions from our Fox 2 viewers, and again, so many. We had hundreds of questions coming from you at home. I want to ask Cody's question right now on the Pulse. Thank you, Cody. These are just two of the questions about transportation. How do you plan on addressing the lack of public transportation in the city of Detroit? There are simply not enough buses, and it has been like this for years. So my question to you is, how you expect someone to keep a job or go to school if they can't rely on the transportation? What do you do with that?
And that sticks a pin in my emotion because I understand that transportation in the city of Detroit is not just a option and a desire, is an essential. It was what I depended on as a child and as a young adult, and it's what the citizens should have access to. What we'll do is make sure that we initiate rapid bus transportation for even out of the area. We got to make sure that our people are able to get to work that work outside of the city as well and get around in the city. So we'll jumpstart like Gratiot, Grand River, Michigan Avenue, and Gratiot, those areas that we need and we know that are viable routes. But we'll make sure that we improve and pour more money into reliable transportation to make sure that the driver's safe and the citizens that got to ride those routes are safe. And we'll make sure that we do ADA accessibility, making sure that we're taking care of the most vulnerable as well.
But when you say that, you say get out, make sure that there's transportation out of the city as well. You mean the whole region, right?
Yes,
Metro Detroit.
Exactly.
There have been pushbacks from years ago, from Brooks Patterson days until now, people in other counties who don't want to work so well together with Detroit to build that kind of a transit system.
Just like Detroit is facing great opportunities with fresh and new leadership that's a little more receptive, I see that happening, not just in Detroit, I see that happening in the region, and I'm looking forward to working with those leaders.
Last question for you is about the ARPA funds. For those who aren't familiar, that's the American Rescue Fund.
Yes.
Dollars that we've been sitting on for quite some time, $800 million plus.
Yes.
Those will not be there should you become mayor. Yet you have to give your police and your fire a raise. You got to make sure people are safe, all without those funds. How do you move forward?
We have to invest in small businesses in the city of Detroit, and we got to make sure that we're creating opportunities. We have too many people who are leaving the city because they're not opportunities. You can't leave the city. The soul of the city is at stake. When you have half of the children still living in poverty, and you have a poverty rate this high and crime this high, and not access to quality education, we got to create opportunities, and we got to stop kicking can down the road. We got to start engaging our schools so our young people can participate.
But what about the dollars, Pastor? Where do those dollars come from? When the ARPA money dries up, what do you do with that frozen funding that you thought you had?
I believe that we're leaving too much and too many resources on the table. I believe we got some great philanthropic partners in this city who are knocking at the door, already waiting and willing to receive the next mayor of the city of Detroit.
The World Series is knocking at our door now, so we have to go. But Pastor Kinlock, it was good to see you. Thanks for joining us. That is it for this special edition of the Pulse. Our big Pulse week does continue with Mike Duggan, John James, and Jocelyn Benson all sitting down with me to talk about their runs for governor. We hope you'll join us then. I'm Roop Raj. As always, it was good to be with you.
Yo.